Hello friends, welcome to the Element 360 channel. Today we will discuss various topics, raise the issue of international real estate markets and generally talk about the Bali market, all the pitfalls, risks, objections and the work of management companies. We will try to cover all the questions as deeply as possible so that you understand how the markets are structured, what is important to pay attention to and how to make well-considered decisions. My name is Maurice Polnikov. I am the CEO of the Element 360 project, an international real estate agency, as well as a closed investment community. Today we have Lev Andreev as our guest, the chief analyst of Element 360. Lev, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone, my name is Lev. As Maurice introduced me, besides bringing clients into the company Element 360, I also engage in analysis, data collection, comparative project analysis, and building financial models, and so on. I've been in real estate for about 9 years, starting at 18 in St. Petersburg. Maurice, tell us, how you got into the real estate market?
My journey into the real estate market began in quite an interesting way. Throughout my life, I tried quite a few new directions and was constantly searching for myself. It all started with cleaning. I had a cleaning company in Belarus, a network of car washes, a tire fitting business, and a car service station. And in these niches, I probably held top 3 positions in the regions. Besides that, I continued searching for myself. I also tried my hand at the production format in the sale of exclusive cars. I had a fairly large recording studio in Belarus. In fact, I was constantly searching for something. I was also involved in coffee roasting for a coffee shop, coffee machine service, a big background. In terms of building sales departments for businesses, my key skills are marketing. That was my profession. That's a marketer and sales management. Later on, I mastered the profession of international product management and began to enter international markets. The first thing I noticed for myself was that, in principle, the algorithms of business interaction with the market are similar everywhere. Structure is important, business processes are important, marketing is important, customer orientation is important, but also the depth of expertise and competence as a whole. With these skills, I clearly understood that it would be quite easy to enter the real estate market because I saw it from the inside. All the pains and all probably such quite deep aspects that are not highlighted in the market. My experience began in Turkey, then moved to Dubai, based out of Dubai. When the market started to enter a correction, I began to focus on the Bali market. Because I saw the potential, I saw that the market was just beginning to develop and shifted my focus there. Today we have prepared a series of in-depth questions where we will analyze the entire structure of real estate markets, how they operate, what algorithms are important to consider, how to make decisions correctly, what pitfalls and risks exist, and how everything is generally pieced together.
The real estate market, how it interacts with the potential investor market, and yes, today we have a number of questions that we would like to discuss and share the answers with you. Therefore, today I will be more in the role of an interviewer, though asking them to Maurice, and we will try to explore them as deeply as possible. So the first question is quite fundamental. What does the international real estate market represent as a whole?
Okay, I'll start and you can add if needed. In my opinion, essentially all international markets are interconnected in their structure. They are similar. My opinion is that all markets are cyclical. This doesn't apply only to the real estate market. In general, stock markets, cryptocurrencies, everything has a growth phase, a stagnation phase, and a correction phase. If we look specifically at the real estate market, what factors do we observe? The fact that internally the market always starts, if it's young, to grow and develop. How does it develop? It develops in the context that a significant amount of investment flows in and many companies enter. Everyone starts interacting, working on mistakes, internal competition emerges, and the market begins to interact and grow in this way. Over time, there is oversaturation, considering that a large part of the market is always focused on commerce and the short-sightedness of the overall structure of potential development in client interaction. Let's analyze this using Dubai as an example. How the market began to develop, what is happening here now, and let's make some comparisons with other markets so that our listeners can understand why certain things happen and what conclusions should be drawn when considering investing in international markets. First, I want to point out that the main key factor that manifests in corrections is the dominance of the secondary market. This is a clear indicator that the market is gradually entering a correction phase, which is usually absent in a young market. In an old market, there is very little secondary market activity, construction is actively developing, and a lot of developers enter, most often inexperienced ones. Also, some industry giants enter, and the process of market development actively begins in the initial stages. This is always a low-quality construction potential which begins to develop due to internal competition, as seen in the example of Dubai. A lot of developers started entering there, it was quite a free economic zone, and no one imposed high taxes. Questions regarding the inflow and outflow of funds thus attracted a significant investment potential and launched the market. Plus, I want to highlight that all this hype and buzz was actually created by people, investors, and real estate agencies. Developers who invested hundreds of millions in marketing, and this buzz, organically through social networks, constantly heated up the market and attracted significant potential from investors. In Dubai, this story is truly unique. It's an international brand that demonstrated a unique turn of events. How can the real estate market develop as a whole? Dubai showed a decade-long upward trend, and all the skepticism surrounding Dubai, claiming it's a bubble, that a correction will come tomorrow, that real estate will drop fivefold, is at the level of this buzz. The hype never materialized, even taking the current year as an example when everyone expected another correction in the Dubai market. In fact, sales volumes are even higher than the previous year. Why does this happen? Dubai is unique in that, besides the real estate market itself, the United Arab Emirates is a very smart country with a very strong political structure. And I believe that the leading figures who manage the economy are quite pragmatic and have a very far-sighted perspective, because they accurately predict the right steps that need to be taken for the economy to develop, and even major investors continue to look at the UAE market. The main potential is investments, because the UAE has long since stopped earning its main income from oil and refining, and accordingly their potential lies in powerful marketing. The UAE Dubai. This is specifically a powerful structure. Packaging. As a marketer, I analyze their model. I would say that they are the strongest marketers who clearly understand how to attract attention and ensure that the UAE is always in the hype, on trend, and at the top. Therefore, they get a 10 plus. This is a unique business project based on a thoroughly thought out packaging and professional deep psychological approach. Their marketing is maximally developed for decades. Speaking about the real estate market in Dubai today, objectively speaking, most projects do not provide capitalization, and the return on investment from short-term or long-term rentals is quite low on average. If you choose a liquid project and do so consciously, understanding the market algorithms, the infrastructure of the area, the potential, and the location, when investing in Dubai, you will receive about 4-6% annually. This is relatively decent, but the story here is more about parking your money, and probably doing so in a branded location to emphasize your status. Because Dubai, like all markets, is built on uniqueness and luxury. I will briefly explain what is happening with Dubai right now. The market is now close to a correction stage. What it characterizes this? It is characterized by the dominance of the secondary market, because the offerings of the secondary market today are much more promising and liquid. In most cases, compared to what is offered off-plan, that is, new constructions. This clearly shows that there is a lot of supply. Due to the high supply, there is a correction in prices because these are the direct laws of economic supply and demand. Why is this happening? Yes, because if we look at Dubai, after all, Dubai is a luxury city where millionaires and billionaires gather. All real estate markets are built on a very simple phase, which is the phase of the premium segment, unique properties, and the mass market phase. In the mass market, people most often invest, lose their money, either under-earn or incur losses. In luxury projects, which are always in trend, people continue to increase capitalization and achieve good figures. But in a growing market, a young growing market, even the mass market at certain stages, the initial ones, it still provides good return on investment figures, capitalization grows, good rental income figures, but over time this manifests in a completely different direction. Regarding Dubai, as of today, you can work there and earn money, but it is a specific niche. Premium, luxury, and heavy luxury, where potential investors are looking in Dubai who don't have just $200 or 100,000 in their pockets, but large investments that are put into premium properties. If we look at the mass market segment, the mass market today is quite a risky and unpromising story in terms of investments. And this has been recognized for quite some time now, and thus began analyzing other markets and tried to find more potential locations where one could also enter and do well. To work closely on the market development over time and help investors grow and expand, but potentially as a company. Thus, I shifted my focus to Bali, started studying it remotely, began selling it remotely, saw the potential, and decided to shift the focus to Bali and Dubai. We continue to work on it, but selectively, because I strive to conduct an open and honest policy with my investors. Well, I don't work in phases, and there are 30 to 100% annual returns when in fact they don't exist, and the market clearly highlights that there are problems. Therefore, regarding Dubai, if my clients want to enter there, I clearly describe the market, indicating that they can enter. But you will get your 4 to 6% annual returns. If you are ready for this, you can count on it. Please, we select projects, the figures we initially discussed and agreed upon. You will receive them in terms of pain. Here the situation is of course different. The market is promising, it's young, but again, highly risky. Where there is a young market, there are always great prospects, but definitely also great risks, because where there are no risks, there are no prospects. Take the European market, for example, which offers 2 to 3, or in exceptional cases, 4% annually. Why? Because in principle, everything there has already been restructured, it's clear, everything is thoroughly checked at the legislative level, there is basic security, and the key factor is that the market has already developed itself. In every direction, left, right, up and down.
I wanted to ask, what other real estate markets are there? Well, you've kind of already answered. In fact, in Dubai, the greatest growth was shown by projects in the premium segment, something exclusive, small, and significantly standing out from others, such as the Address hotels, villas on the Palm. Branded residences with various collaborations showed very good results, with clothing brands, watch brands, and so on. This trend was indeed promising. As for the mass market, I have a lot of stories. People approached me who bought during the phase of active growth, regardless of prices and so on. They bought some real estate, approached me with the aim of reselling, but in fact, its market value on the secondary market was half of what they paid for it at the time of purchase. Therefore, one really needs to be careful with the mass market, but still, the market shows growth despite all these, and despite the negative noise that always follows growing markets. Why do you think it happens that at the moment when it's really necessary to invest, there is negativity, some noise, criticism, and people hesitate and don't enter at the moment when they should?
Probably the key factor, let's be honest, considering that we have been in the market for quite a long time and deeply, and we see what is happening, and everything happens in a banal, simple, and understandable way. About 50% of the deals that are made are unsuccessful and unsuccessful. Why does this happen? First, probably it's the human factor, it's greed, narrow-mindedness, because people don't see long-term prospects in working with people, in long-term relationships. When the concept of investment works in such a way that the investor you are interacting with potentially offers you the prospect of more than a one-time deal. Smart investments are always the first strategy. And based on this strategy, you work with the investor's capital over the sea, long term. You buy, you help manage. Until the market correction, you help exit the deal. Then you help re-enter. Therefore, only a few companies and experts have this vision. Consequently, mostly one-time deals are made, there is no deep expertise, and people buy 90. In percentage terms, all these unsuccessful stories, where skepticism and negativity are just unsuccessful mass market projects. Because all markets are similar and they operate according to the same algorithms, what is it? Well, liquidity is what will create potential. Your investment, which should grow in terms of capitalization, should also provide you with additional return on investment according to the financial model. And in the case of the mass market, it's quite difficult to apply because the mass market always has a lot of similarities, always a lot of supply, and thus there is no uniqueness. And when there is no uniqueness, why should a client, investor, or person pay a lot for a long time and at a high price for it? Accordingly, the main problem, which I'm leading to, is that 50% of all deals are made, simply put, without understanding how the market works. The market's operation is always about uniqueness. Unique projects and unique things are expensive. Accordingly, those who invested in unique projects have a positive outlook on all markets, because from the start they understood the algorithms, unlike those who invested in the mass market, as I emphasized earlier. In the early stages of a growing market, this yields results at the moment of the middle phase or already at the high phase close to a correction. This always results in investment losses, or the figures achieved are not what the investor initially planned. Therefore, such skepticism and negativity arise only because, firstly, companies operate incompetently and dishonestly, and secondly, people do not understand how both to correctly choose and what constitutes the liquidity of investments in international markets.
Maurice, so what do you think? Which other markets are relevant today besides Dubai and Bali? You mentioned them. Are there any other interesting markets, and what do you think about them?
I would probably emphasize this as well. The key factor is what is important. Understanding seasonality where there is a season, and it is always difficult to form a stable financial model in a growing market. That's another story. When the market has already relatively passed the peak growth phases, those markets where there is no seasonality always have lagging indicators. Accordingly, we can also look at, besides the Dubai market, the Bali market, at the Vietnam market and the Thailand market, which are also vibrant. As of today, they are developing, but firstly there is seasonality present there. Speaking in terms of Bali, Bali of course does not have pronounced seasonality. There is a high season and a mid-season there. In terms of Vietnam and Thailand, I want to emphasize that there perhaps the target audience is narrower, because in Thailand, after all, more Russian-speaking people go there with a focus English-speaking. The international market is looking there. They actively travel there, but it is still not as active a share as in the case of Bali, because Bali, I can compare it to Dubai and I will explain why it is an international brand. I clearly see that people from all over the world fly here. It's not just Russian-speaking people. Absolutely everyone is here. All of Europe, Scandinavians, China, India, Canada, the USA. Everyone vacations here, so there is no seasonality as such. There is a busy season when there are simply millions of tourists, everything is packed everywhere, and there is a mid-season when it's just a little less than this dense active peak season. Accordingly, if we talk about the markets of Vietnam and Thailand, they are also active markets, but they have seasonality. Consequently, the return on investment indicators there are lower. If you characterize Vietnam, for example, you can achieve an understanding of locations, developers, projects, potential, and liquidity with proper investment ranging from 6 to 8% annually. For Europe, these are good and reasonable figures. If we consider Thailand, you can also more or less achieve 8% annually. For many, these are good active indicators. But if we consider more hyped markets where you can make, well, I'll put it this way because I see in practice that X is happening, and this story is more about pain. Accordingly, there is no seasonality here. It's a young market, there is potential, but again, very high risks, which we will also try to discuss and highlight today. Lev, you are probably more competent, deeply immersed in the numbers and statistics. Please tell us, perhaps about the density of the tourist flow, who predominates here, who visits more often, specifically in terms of tourists, because the tourist demand is important. And perhaps who is potentially looking more at Bali from an investment perspective? Which countries and who has more? Currently, what is the focus and demand in terms of real estate purchases?
The tourist flow to Bali is indeed very diverse. Historically, of course, Australians make up the largest part of the tourist flow. For them, Bali is like a familiar place, like a summer house. For them, it's just a few hours flight. Very convenient, quick, plus it's much cheaper here than in Australia. They even have a common joke that it's cheaper to come to Bali for a weekend than to have a beer at their local bar in Australia. That's why they make up about half of the tourist flow to Bali. But nowadays they are starting to be surpassed in terms of tourist flow by countries like China, India, as well as Europe and the United States of America. This year, we have seen a colossal increase in the number of tourists from China, and India is also continuing to gain volume in tourist flow.
I also want to emphasize that, in principle, Bali is considered not only for tourism purposes. Bali is interesting because globally the situation is currently unstable, and people from all over the world are thinking about where they might relocate. Therefore, Bali is generally considered for relocation by countries like Canada, the USA, Europe. And we are not only talking about young people, we are talking about elderly people who, due to high inflation and high price levels in Europe itself, are seeking a more comfortable life in their old age. Accordingly, Bali is very potentially suitable for this scenario.
Europeans still make up a large share, and it is increasing. They mainly come from Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, and many other European countries. Of course, they also come from the USA and Canada. By the way, when it comes to the average amount tourists are willing to spend here, the leaderboard is somewhat different. Norway is currently in first place, followed by Britain, then China, India. I also want to note that one of the reasons for such a large tourist flow is the diversity. The tourist profile in Bali is very diverse. Here, people can find entertainment and hobbies to suit any taste. The island is very diverse and offers opportunities for completely different types of recreation. There is beach relaxation, surfing, and nightlife with gastronomy, bars, nightclubs, and so on. Incredible jungles, the island's nature with waterfalls, greenery, volcanoes, and accordingly, hiking. You can climb the volcanoes, which is also one of the main attractions, main tourist destinations. In general, the island can be explored endlessly. There are 4 climate zones here, there are even pine forests and so on. Morris, what could you add?
Listen, I completely agree with you. Bali is an extremely diverse location that meets all possible needs of a tourist, a person who comes here. Most people who fly here don't delve deep. And if they don't have, say, a guide or someone who has been here, they can't always fully experience it and be amazed by the entire history. Because Bali, as you pointed out, is endless in terms of exploration. You can find something new every day, climb volcanoes, swim in the ocean, travel, party, stroll, and enjoy delicious food. In fact, you can plan each day for yourself as an interesting program. But it's very important that when you fly to Bali, you plan your itinerary in advance and research the locations beforehand, because each area on the island is potentially suited to specific tourist needs. Now, let's move on and talk about the regions of Bali and take a deeper look at the demands of these areas in terms of investment and living, what they represent, and what the key factors are overall. Within this area they exist. I also want to emphasize that besides the tourist demand and the annual flow without seasonality, there is also a high potential for relocation here. Considering that the current global situation is ambiguous and very concerning, Bali is generally viewed as a location where people are moving from Europe, Australia, and America. It's not just young couples, but there is a specific demand, and it is being thoroughly developed. I actively see this in communications with clients regarding their age requests, their desire, and the direction they are generally considering. Bali is for elderly people who are currently in Europe, where inflation is high and the cost of living is skyrocketing, where the quality of life in the long term into old age will not be as promising as what the island can offer today. Because here the climate is super nice, the food is affordable, and there is a variety of food. Moreover, Europeans can generally afford to buy property here and arrange a carefree retirement.
We've talked about Bali in general. I suggest we now shift the focus to investments, specifically in real estate. Tell us more about the country in general. What is the investment climate like here? And Bitai, what is the legislation regarding investors?
Let's probably start with Indonesia itself. I want to point out that the population of Indonesia is about 280 million people. By 2027, the working age population here will be around 70%. This is a tremendous boost and potential for economic development. I also want to point out that as of today, there is no strict financial monitoring in Indonesia. It's a similar situation compared to the United Arab Emirates. Investments come in easily here and no one questions where they came from or how they are withdrawn. This is again a powerful point that allows the economy to develop, because in this direction specifically, we are not just talking about Bali, but entire countries are looking at Indonesia. And today, quite a few major infrastructure productions are being relocated to Indonesia, being set up and scaled. Therefore, in the context of the Bali market, we primarily focus on Indonesia as a growing economy that provides potential for the overall development of this location. And I want to note that besides Bali, there are additional islands that we will also highlight and discuss in future episodes, which are actively developing in the direction of tourism and will potentially offer a good return on investment and the purchase of liquid foreign real estate. I also want to note that in Indonesia, the labor force is quite cheap compared to China, which experienced a powerful potential economic growth, where they also looked at cheap labor and relocated their production. Both America, Canada, and Europe, and in this way it nurtured China's internal economy. Similar things are happening here due to the cheap labor force. I want to emphasize once again that many countries are actively relocating production to Indonesia and actively scaling it, so this is another great potential for the country's development. And accordingly, the same applies to the Bali region regarding Bali. I want to note that we are looking not only at the international market that comes there and buys. We must look at the entire country, which also comes to Bali and is quite significant. A considerable volume of transactions also comes from Indonesia, with locals buying into the Bali market and actively investing there, so the potential for the entire country is quite large. Now I suggest we move directly to the island itself and take a look at how the real estate market is structured, what is happening there, and delve into the main issues, risks, fears, pitfalls, and the entire structure of the investment market that is currently developing there. I want to note that the Bali market in general began to emerge in the construction format probably since COVID. That's about 5 years. And only today do I see that the market is starting to truly develop actively. And how is this happening? This is happening due to the improvement of the market, the internal structure, and the quality of what is being built. Objectively speaking, considering that the market is young, this is absolutely normal. There are quite a few low-quality projects here. And only thanks to internal competition are developers and the market starting to develop. Bali is moving in a better direction, I won't argue with that, but you must be extremely cautious because out of 100% of what is being built, in fact, only 10% of the projects have liquidity, quality, and potential. I'll explain why. I want to talk now about developers and shed some light on how the structure works. What is the entry for developers, what they do, and in fact, what is happening inside Bali's construction system? First, there is a very low entry barrier to the market. In fact, anyone can enter here, even someone without construction experience. There are 3 categories of developers here. The first are the mastodons, who entered the market a long time ago, mastered it, purchased large volumes of land, and began actively building and scaling up, in most cases. These companies are moving towards the mass market and over time will not provide potential for investment growth for their investors. There is a second class of developers. These are young companies, but they are more focused on building long-term relationships with investors. They are more focused on quality. They are more focused on the uniqueness of boutique projects. They are deeper and they do not develop on such a large scale. They are more focused on specific projects, taking longer to plan, develop, and control quality, redoing work several times considering specificities, but they strive to maintain their reputation because they have slightly different strategies and a different mindset for working in the market. Well, and the third factor is probably the newcomer companies, which in fact they may not have investment capital, background experience, business processes, or a strong structured team, but they are in the market, they have developed some presentation, they go around with this presentation, the land is not purchased, there are no investments for construction, yet they present themselves as a company already engaged in construction. What is a developer? A developer is essentially a company that clearly understands how to organize the construction process. It's not necessarily the kind of story where you must have your own internal construction structure, but you generally understand how the specifics of building an object work. Because in this scenario, the developer can act independently by building their own internal construction infrastructure or by hiring good general contractors. But this does not mean that they are bad or inexperienced. Here, the underlying situation is a bit more complex because in Bali, considering that the market is young, not everyone understands what it entails. The function of construction and the developer represents. Just as many real estate agencies do not understand how to interact in the market. Because when I arrived here, what I initially saw was that everyone here is involved in, it's unclear what is needed. First, I noticed that developers, instead of focusing on the fundamental aspect of construction, start getting into marketing, start getting into the sales department, trying to sell themselves. Instead of simply providing a quality product and establishing a good partnership with real estate agencies, there's this kind of internal commotion. The lack of an established business process mainly occurs and has occurred in the market. But if there are companies that have experience and clearly understand their functions, they are specifically focused on construction. They take strong, good partners, make good, substantial sales, and actively scale and develop accordingly. The big risks here involve understanding who you are working with. Because I pointed out that besides having reliable developers, there is still the factor that you are investing with large mass market developers. Accordingly, we have already compared, using Dubai as an example, what is happening today with the mass market. The mass market is undergoing a correction. Accordingly, it is crucial for you to clearly choose what kind of developer it is, what their strategy is, what their overall perception of projects is, where they are looking, where they are heading, and what their product is composed of. With such an understanding, when you grasp the structure of the market's operational factors, you have the potential to invest well and profitably in real estate. Accordingly, you must thoroughly analyze these three categories and draw your own conclusions. Who do you actually want to work with in this scenario? I want to emphasize that, in fact, the first and second types are in a working relationship with the market. But you need to analyze and understand what the developer is actually offering, what constitutes the uniqueness and liquidity of the project.
And how can you distinguish one developer from another? With the giants, it's still clear these are the largest developers who advertise everywhere. They already have a large number of completed projects. But how do you distinguish the second type? From boutique quality developers to newcomers who lack experience, background, and often their own financing, they often look very similar if you look at it superficially.
First and foremost, I would pay attention to the fact that if you are not a real estate market expert, in general, it is difficult for you to understand both the market itself and to check a company for its liquidity and potential for safety, because only extensive observation, significant experience, and processing of large cases provide a wealth of knowledge and ensure safety in decision-making over time. Accordingly, some basic algorithms, functions, I will now outline. All of this for you. But in fact, first and foremost, besides developing independently and learning something, it is very important to find a strong partner whom you can trust. And together with them, because such partners do not operate on the basis of just pushing something on you, telling you that you need to take it. They work in tandem just like we do. We teach investors all the basic algorithms for interacting with the market. We educate them on understanding how the market works, how tourist demand functions, and what fundamentally constitutes the entire potential of investments. But a clear strategy must be developed along with an overall understanding of how investments will perform over time. Accordingly, the basic algorithms are essentially something that just needs to be understand how long the developer has been in the market, that's one thing, check the legal documents, find out who the founders are, learn what they were involved in before. This is a very important factor, even if, for example, the developer is new. If they have completed projects, or even if they don't, perhaps they have other projects in other countries, which is also good. Okay? Then look at the general contractor. It's not always a concern if the developer is new, but if they have well-established business processes and a strong general contractor, where you can see good cases, a completed construction project, and be convinced that with such a strong general contractor, okay, I see that this company will still be able to build the project, because at the same time you see your communication with them, see how the sales department works, how the marketing department operates, and how the internal processes in the company are generally structured. And by analyzing their technical documentation, involving the same engineer for the project documentation, and visiting the construction site, you can already basically understand what the company is made of. It's important to pay attention to the legal aspects. First, ensure that the land has been purchased and is owned. It is advisable to obtain a certificate from an independent legal organization for due diligence, or such a certificate may be available from the developer. In general, review the founding documents, visit the construction site, and have a conversation. Even these basic factors that I am mentioning will clearly show you whether the company is substantial or if everything will fall apart like a house of cards at the initial stage, and you'll realize that there's absolutely nothing to do with them here. Therefore, besides studying the market on your own, which is good, you should have a highly reliable expert. An experienced one who is on the island, not just for 5 months or half a year, but someone who has lived here for some time, seen things from the inside, worked on deals, communicated, and experienced all these situations because there are many hidden pitfalls.
Yes, indeed, one of the distinctive features of Bali is that what you are buying here is essentially not just real estate but a ready-made business. Since you will need to communicate with the builder for an extended period. He will not only build your property but will also be responsible for its maintenance and sometimes even renting it out. Therefore, it is very important to approach the choice of developer correctly. And here, you need to evaluate it not just as real estate, but more as a business. Look at the founders, their background, and their experience to get a complete picture and understanding of how aligned you are with these people and how much you believe that they can not only build this project but also launch it and maintain it in good standing for many years in terms of profitability indicators.
I completely agree with you here that the financial model of this market, which we haven't covered yet, is radically different from the classic models of Dubai, Thailand, or Vietnam. Here, the financial model is built as a turnkey investment business. When choosing the right developer, as you noted, Lev, the developer not only implements the project but actually performs all the work from project implementation to management. And with the right investments, the right choice, when you make the right deal, you simply invest once and effectively receive a turnkey investment business ready for rental. And you don't participate in anything. Quality management, quality construction, you effectively just receive cash flow. And this is an important indicator, a factor in how to invest correctly, how to choose this developer, how to understand how the management company will operate. Because, well, management is a serious matter, and it's important to clearly understand that there are also many pitfalls here. A management company can provide you with a high return on investment, but it can also take away all your profit and even drag you down with an assessment that over time you won't be able to resell the project, because to sell a project you need to demonstrate liquidity through profitability and transparency of the financial model and metrics, which will be confirmed by real people who rented your unit. Accordingly, if a unit has poor economics, it will be impossible to sell it at a high price.
Let's now discuss the key strategies available in the Bali real estate market.
There are two key strategies. The first strategy is flipping. And the second popular strategy, which is more preferred by the English-speaking market, is a more conservative strategy of long-term rental. If we talk about flipping, there are three types of flipping: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. When it comes to short-term flipping, it's a scenario where we enter at the pre-sale stage, preferably at closed pre-sales, where the price is even lower, say, than the regular pre-sale by 5, 10, 15%, and we can practically exit from deals quite quickly, ideally within 6 months. The perfect flipping scenario would probably be medium term, when the developer has already sold all the units completely, the project is successful, it is popular, and all the units are already sold out. And you entered at the pre-sale or at a closed pre-sale with a discount of 5, 10, 15%. After the units are sold out and some construction stages have already taken place, you can make a flip here of about 20-30%. The third long-term flipping is when the developer completes the construction. And you can actually work in two ways. Either sell upon completion, because the English-speaking market, I should emphasize, also really likes to buy already finished properties. They are afraid to invest in plans, so this is their target audience. When the unit is ready in this short flipping, you can already offer it to the English-speaking audience upon the project's completion. You can earn from 15 to 50% during the construction period. Again, these are some exceptional cases because it's not that simple, because many don't even earn 10%. There are such cases. But we are now talking about smart investments, so in an average flipping, you can earn from 15% to 50% upon completion. There are some rare cases where you can make 100% degree upon the completion of construction. But this is more often the exception than the rule. There are such cases too, and we will highlight them. But now, let's continue further about investment models. There is long-term flipping. Long-term flipping is when you enter at the pre-sale with a 5-10% discount and wait for the construction to finish. And you rent out your property for a period of 3 to 6 months. And essentially, you already have a ready financial model to present your investment business to an investor. Accordingly, you increase the capitalization by entering at the pre-sale. You nurtured it, grew it to the construction stage, received the property, and rented it out for 3-6 months. And in fact, this way, your high profitability here can range from 30% to 70%. These are the average figures when entering liquid projects. And probably the next model is long-term conservative leasing over a period of 5 to 7 years. You similarly increased the capitalization through construction by entering at the pre-sale, then completed the construction, rented out the property for 2, 3, 5, or 7 years depending on your investment strategy, and sold it with a profit of 100 to 150%. This also depends on what steps you took and how you executed them. But this long-term strategy is most often chosen by Europeans. It is effective, but it is safer and more conservative.
And regarding rental in general, how much does renting yield in Bali? How much can you earn per month?
Let's also look at the market, frankly, and talk about honest numbers. Because there's a lot of marketing, a lot of hot advertising claiming that Bali yields 20 to 30% annually. That's not the case. If you take the average market indicator when choosing a good, successful liquid project, your rental yield, return on investment can reach from 12 to 15% annually. These are real numbers, but you need to clearly understand what the location is, who the developer is, and who will be moving in. You should have clear analytics, a comparative analysis, an understanding of the uniqueness of your project, its liquidity, and how the management company will operate. Accordingly, the average indicators are 12 to 15%. But this is often an exception because if you look at the market as a whole, many projects yield 6, 8%, 4, and 5%. You can find that too. But this is not a market factor. It's a factor of the real estate choice that the investor makes.
It turns out that the management company is a very important factor when choosing a real estate object. Tell us more about who is involved in this, what kind of company it is, and how it is structured. How to choose the best option.
I want to point out that a project can be liquid, good, promising, unique. You can have a strong location, good scenic characteristics. But if the management is weak, even such a project will not give you good returns on investment. Capitalization may grow, but it will be difficult to expect good rental income figures. What risks generally exist when working with management companies? The first thing I want to note is that it's very important to clearly understand the reputation and case studies of this company, how many management properties they have. Thoroughly investigate the background of this company, how long it has been in the market. How does this company report? Because management companies often have a lot of non-transparent analytics where the investor literally does not understand what is happening with their property. In addition, there are delays with payments. I also want to add that many management companies take a large portion of the profits. If we take the average market segment, then management, specifically considering short-term rentals, takes from your total gross revenue 100% to 50%. This includes marketing expenses for services of this format like Airbnb, booking, as well as additional expenses for maintenance, cleaning, and taxes. Accordingly, if you are calculating your financial model, it's better to deduct 50% from the figures for how much it will be rented out daily. Unit are the real numbers you can rely on. Management companies here work either from profit or generally from a percentage of the revenue. There are also different interaction schemes, but the important factors are that management is probably also one of the key factors, just like the developer who builds the property, is the location. I want to draw your attention to the fact that there are such cases in the market, and it's important for you to hear this story now, that a developer can build properties, set up their own management company, and in the contract, it will be absolutely prohibited to change the management company, and thus you simply end up in bondage. Because the management might be inexperienced, of poor quality, or dishonest. and your unit will simply yield very low return on investment figures. First, you won't be earning. Second, you won't be able to resell your investment at a high price, simply because first, the unit is in bondage. A sensible investor will pay attention to this. Second, you won't have good figures, return on investment. Accordingly, such an investment, such real estate will not be needed by anyone, not always due to poor management, by the developer, and where management companies, for example, necessarily in the contract, if we take some apartment complexes where you buy a unit apartment. Of course, you cannot manage it yourself because the entire complex has its own internal system and business processes. Here, companies naturally choose their own management companies or manage it themselves, and that's all okay. But it's important for you to understand the competencies and clarity of the management company's business processes. If it is a good, proven company, and even if your contract prohibits, for example, changing the management company in a hotel apartment complex, it's not a big deal. It's important that the management company is still professional, and these key factors regarding reporting, ready-made cases, and communication checks are crucial. You have checked everything and ensured that your decision is well considered. Accordingly, in the management market here, there are also many pitfalls and fears that are important to analyze and understand deeply. Make a well-considered decision because you can earn a 15% return or you can earn 5. And it all depends specifically on your well-considered choice. I believe it is quite important now to raise the issue of documents, how a deal is formalized, what to pay attention to, and thoroughly examine and highlight this matter because it is probably one of the key factors where you can seriously get caught and lose your money.
Yes, indeed, Bali is very different in terms of real estate purchases compared to European countries. The usual way of purchasing that we are accustomed to does not exist here. That is, there is no full ownership rights for foreigners. It is only available to local Indonesian residents. Here there is the British system, leasehold, which is the same full ownership as in other countries, but limited in time. And there are two main types. In fact, there are more. They have Indonesian names, but for simplicity, we define them as leasehold and freehold. With a standard leasehold, our term is usually limited to 25-30 years. And a distinguishing feature is that the contract is made with an individual Indonesian citizen. In the case of freehold, the situation is a bit different. Here, the maximum term is 80 years. There is also an extension scheme of 30, 20, 30 years. But in this case, the distinguishing feature is that the extension will be done through the government. That is, all our agreements are with the government. Both of these property rights allow for purchasing land much cheaper than in other countries. Since this is a temporary property right, we get a much lower price. That's why the entry threshold in Bali is comparatively low. And we can find real estate here much cheaper than in Dubai, Thailand, or European countries. We can also generally describe what the purchasing process looks like. Everything is processed through a notary. Initially, you sign a contract with the builder, stating that they are obliged to construct your property and fully transfer ownership to you through an acceptance certificate. The transfer of land is also processed by a notary. And that is, it is an official transaction. It is registered in the registry and you are protected by all property rights, just like in other countries.
I would probably add that it is extremely important when checking and choosing a developer to go through such criteria. The main points, like checking the company's founding documents, then checking the land documents to ensure the land purchase agreement is in place, the land certificate, land validation, an external due diligence check, review all of this thoroughly, weigh it, and only then proceed with the transaction. It is very important to pay attention to. The zoning of the land should also be correct because today we have already encountered a situation with a fairly large company like ParkU, where the issue arose from initially purchasing land in a green zone, and it was not converted in time. Previously, there was an opportunity in Bali to convert land into a commercial zone. Accordingly, it is very important to ensure that the land where the project is being built is suitable for the intended activity and the purpose you plan to achieve with your investment. Therefore, these key factors are very important, and it is crucial to pay attention to them first. After that, once you have checked everything, and preferably you should not do it alone but with assistance. An expert or a lawyer should be involved, but the lawyer must also be specifically knowledgeable about Indonesian legislation and the real estate market from the inside, because very often lawyers who are hired in Bali, I'm telling you honestly, from within the market, they perform their work so strangely. Even when the developer and the project are good, they create an appearance and generate negativity regarding the project and the developer to earn their money. And very often they provide deliberately false information to clients and steer them away from good projects. They can also work in conjunction with other developers and shift the client's focus to other projects that are less liquid and promising. Therefore, it's better to consult a good expert, hire the right lawyer who will do their job clearly and honestly, not like a fool, pretending to earn money and bad-mouthing the construction company or real estate agency, but specifically to understand the basics and the factors we are discussing today because, well, it's important. It's really important when you work with strong, competent people who strive to achieve the same ultimate goal for you so that you can invest as safely as possible and make a profit. But friends, today we tried to cover a number of potentially important issues regarding international real estate markets as deeply and structurally as possible. I want to note that the next episode is coming up where we will raise a number of other interesting questions. And we will help you understand the real estate market. And first of all, learn to think and make decisions independently. Because our goal is not to sell, but to help and provide people with opportunities to develop, expand in the direction of investments, and learn to move strategically rather than just making decisions emotionally. Subscribe to our YouTube and Telegram channels and also watch our free mini course, How to Invest in Bali, and do it as efficiently and safely as possible. This was Maurice Polnikov, CEO of the Element 360 project, and Lev Andreev, the company's analyst.
Goodbye, everyone, and see you soon.